Murder at the Sirius Observatory, Part 2. The school I attend is an all-girls combined middle and high school, with a 150-year-long history to its name. It's a missionary school, world-renowned for schooling young ladies, although in recent years the religious aspect of it has faded a little. Nowadays, the brickwork church and old school building are about the only places you can see its missionary history. Part-time jobs are technically against the rules there, but if you turn in a request to the school, you'll usually get permission anyway. Still, it seems like I was the first person in the school's entire history to ask for permission to work as a detective. Though I mean, as a detective, I'm not really working for a business or for a living. Perhaps you could just say it's who I am. Or maybe it would be better to say that it's a talent? So I kinda wasn't sure if there was any point to asking permission to be a detective in the first place. The nun who's the head mistress was happy about it though. Maybe to her, a detective isn't a state of being or a talent or anything, but volunteer work or something. At any rate, I'm the only detective in the high school. I'm allowed to wear my uniform during formal detective activities for the sake of my work. I usually wear colette shorts instead of a skirt though. This apparently garnered me some animosity from upperclassmen, but it also won me a fair amount of friends too. In order to prioritise my work as a detective, I'm not in any clubs, but it's not like there's always work for me, so after school there isn't really much difference between me and someone who just doesn't participate in anything at all. I just go straight back to the dorm. I've been living in the school dorm ever since I enrolled. I live in a single small room, 4.5 tatami mats, or about 9 by 9 feet, with a kitchen, bath, and toilet attached. This is the reality behind a school for young ladies. I have classmates who are still envious of dorm life, but the rules are more strict than the average household too. It was December, the winter of my first year of high school, when I opened my personal dorm mailbox and noticed I'd been sent a black envelope. A completely black B5 envelope, with no stamp or address. But my name was printed on it in white letters, so there was no doubt that it was meant for me. I picked it up and headed into the dorm. "Ah, welcome back, Yui." In the hall I ran into a girl who lived in one of the other dorm rooms. "What's that, another love letter?" "No way," I smiled bitterly, looking down at the black envelope. It didn't really look like a love letter. If it is one, it must have been a pretty eccentric kind of person that sent it. I'd gotten 2 love letters in the past. One was from a small squirrel-like girl from the next class over, a member of the crafts club. I turned her down, of course. I had to. To this very day, I occasionally catch her lurking in the shadows of the school building, watching me from a distance. The other one was from a girl who sent me a very poetic letter, but there was no name attached, so I don't know who sent it. I didn't bother using my detective skills to investigate any further than that. I went back to my room, throwing myself down onto the bed with my coat still on. I faced the ceiling, holding the envelope up under the fluorescent light, and broke the seal. Inside, there was a letter, and then another smaller black envelope. For the time being, I just unfolded the letter. A written request for Lady Yui Samidari. I hope that business is going well for you as we reach the busy schedules of the end of the year. My name is Yoshizono Oe, and I am contacting you as a representative for someone else. Presently, my client is settling a problematic dispute, and so circumstances led them to send this written request. Furthermore, please understand that I am unable to reveal their identity to you here. The client has reason to believe that their property, the Sirius Observatory, will soon be visited by a dire emergency situation. The details of this request will be given to you during an interview at the location given below, and pending the client's approval, we will plan to contact you again. Meeting location, Hatesaki Station. Meeting date, December 22nd, 3 o'clock PM. Furthermore, You will be compensated with 1 million yen upfront, 1 million yen upon completion, and all other necessary expenses paid. We look forward to meeting you on the scheduled date. Representative Yoshizono Oe. The letter said it was a written request, but its contents gave off a more bizarre impression. Maybe because it didn't have the name of the person making the request, or the details of the request being made. On one hand, it felt like it was some kind of prank or scam, but on the other hand, the emphasis of the key points admittedly felt raw and earnest. It had been about 3 years since I'd become a detective, but this was the first time I'd gotten a request quite like this one. I couldn't understand what it meant no matter how hard I thought about it. That fact alone piqued my curiosity more than any other incident I'd encountered before. The letter was on the plain white paper, and the words were clearly typed in a word processing software. Maybe if I investigated the font, I could deduce what software was used. Using the type of ink it was printed with, I could find out the manufacturer of the printer, but I didn't see any point in figuring that stuff out. For the time being, I set the letter aside and opened up the other black envelope. Inside was a folded letter on black washi paper. The white characters were written in neat lines with a writing brush. A message for the detective. Heed the cry of the noir. Location: Sirius Observatory, 30 million yen. Weapon: large shears, 5 million yen. Weapon: fainting drugs, 5 million yen. Trick: dismemberment, 80 million yen. Total cost: 120 million yen. According to the above costs, the following detective is summoned. Yui Samidori. What is this? I muttered to myself as I turned the black letter around, staring at it. Curiouser and curiouser. Judging from the vocabulary used, it might have been hinting at the information that was hidden from the actual request. Some kind of word association game? Guess at the request using this? But then what was with the numbers written by the words? Maybe it was a puzzle I had to solve to prove my worth as a detective. There was no doubt that the person making the request was trying to test me in some way. Considering how they went out of their way to use a proxy, they probably wanted to turn away the useless detectives at the door without giving them any information about the request at all. It seemed like something big was about to happen. The problem was, it wasn't long until the date of the meetup. The day after tomorrow was that day. If I turned in a form, I could get the day off from classes, so that was fine. But could I really solve this riddle by then? There just wasn't the time. I jumped out of bed, flew out of my room, and hurried back towards the school. The school had a data processing room where you could use the computers for whatever you wanted. If I needed to do research, using the internet there would probably be the quickest way. For the record, I don't have my own computer and my cell phone can't access the internet. It took a few minutes to walk from the dorm to the school building. There were still some students who were in the middle of club activities, or who just hadn't gone home yet. I jogged past them to the data processing room. There were a few students in that room too, wordlessly typing on their keyboards. I gave them all a sidelong glance before taking one of the computers for myself. First, I searched for Sirius Observatory. I confirmed its existence surprisingly easily. Apparently, Sirius Observatory was a private observatory owned by Ryuichiro Kiba. With a newfound fortune amassed through the iron industry during the post-war economic boom, he retired from the business and used the money to build a private observatory, retreating there to live out his life in seclusion. The word observatory brings to mind the sort of establishment owned by the universities and research facilities, but apparently plenty of people with an interest in stars and astronomical observation will build their own private level observatories. Sirius Observatory 2 seemed to be the product of such a hobby. So was the mysterious person making the request this Ryuichiro Kiba person? If he was involved in the post-war iron industry, at the very least it was possible he was familiar with high society. That must have been why he couldn't make this request openly. I tried researching Ryuichiro Kiba next, but I couldn't really find anything that seemed relevant. I couldn't find any record of him being involved in any previous incidents either. Well, there's only so much you can turn up by just looking online after all. I returned to the dorms for the day without making any more progress than that. The next day in class, I was busy thinking about the request. Even though finals were coming up soon, almost all of the class material just went in one ear and out the other. Even though I was sitting at my desk lined up next to my classmates, I felt isolated, as if I alone was in another world entirely. During my lunch break, I looked up at the information on the Kiba family in the library. My school's library has a larger collection of older books than any other library in the area, but it didn't seem like I was going to find any crucial information in the short period of time I had for my lunch break. I left for the time being, resolving to come back after school. I noticed the view outside the windows was darker than usual during my afternoon classes. The sky looked like it was going to start snowing any minute. A wintry low-pressure system was hovering over the east, and from the north, a chill of -40 degrees was advancing towards us through the upper air. No wonder my lips were chapped. As I applied some lip balm during the break, I found myself staring down at the plans for tomorrow written in the letter. Tomorrow was the day. After school, I finally got the information I was looking for in the library. In a 10-year-old back issue of a monthly astronomical journal, I found the word Sirius Observatory. It was an article about visiting private observatories. 4 pages long, with pictures, and about Sirius Observatory, of course. I made a copy of the article and brought it back to the dorm. I'd managed to get hold of a pretty good bit of data to look over, hadn't I? Maybe it wouldn't have anything to do with the request, but at least I felt like I had enough information to answer questions in the interview without a problem. That night, I packed up my notes and data, along with the change of clothes, and so on, just in case. Ready for the next day. My mental preparation also seemed perfect. The only thing I was worried about was the poor weather. The forecast said there would be some snowstorms starting tomorrow. The next day, I skipped school and headed towards Hatasaki Station. By the time I got there, it was already snowing a little. The surrounding area was full of rice paddies that were dried up for the winter, and despite the daylight, the snow made it dim and gloomy, with just the occasional faint light from private residences filtering through. The time was 2:00 PM. It was an hour earlier than I was supposed to arrive, but the train only ran there twice an hour, so I played it safe when I left the dorms, and wound up arriving extra early. Only 2 people got off the train with me at this unmanned station. I went to wait in the waiting room. There were only 2 benches lined up in the small room, with a cylindrical stove burning between them. I parked myself in front of the stove immediately, warming my cold hands. Then, the 2 men who got off at the station with me earlier came inside. They both sat wordlessly on the benches, each checking their watches before looking around themselves. At this dead-end station, with no signs of life, seemingly at the very edge of the world, 3 whole people sitting around and killing time was clearly an unusual situation. I was the first to speak. To be honest, I was afraid. Right then, I was nothing more than a high school girl surrounded by 2 unfamiliar men in unfamiliar territory. "Are either of you Yoshizono Oe?" Both of the men reacted to my timid question at the same time, exchanging glances as if fumbling for an answer, before looking back at me. "So you're a detective too, miss?" The first man to speak had hair neatly parted at the precise 7:3 ratio. He was wearing a suit and a long coat, along with a tightly fastened glossy necktie. He was the very picture of a capable salaryman, without any trace of individual personality in his appearance. If we had been in the business district, he probably would have melted into the background instantly. He was just that mundane to look at. "I may not look it, but I'm a detective too." He pointed at himself with his thumb. "And you probably are too, huh?" he asked the man sitting across the room from him. That man was wearing sunglasses. Behind the dim grey lenses, I could just barely see which direction he was looking. He had short hair and a strong frame. He wore a black tank top underneath a trench coat, with a dog tag hanging around his neck. Somehow he gave off the impression that he wasn't your average Joe. The man in sunglasses nodded, remaining silent. "3 detectives, and still no representation?" the man in the suit said theatrically, crossing his arms. "What do you mean?" My voice shook out of nervousness and fear. I wasn't the only one who was contacted for the request? So it seems, the man in the suit said, a bold smile appearing on his face. There's still time till the appointment. Who knows how many more people will show up? I see. If I thought about it, of course, I probably hadn't been the only detective called out. And that letter with the written request could have been sent to anybody. As long as they just changed the name on it. If the person making the request was trying to test their detectives, the most efficient way to do that would to be invite multiple people to come to the interview. The two men started killing time in their own ways. The man in the suit was listening to his headphones as he flipped through a book on English conversation. Exactly how your average salaryman would try to kill time. On the other hand, the man in the sunglasses was playing with some foreign coin in his fingers. Occasionally he scared me by apparently remembering something and letting out a huff of laughter. Unable to stand the atmosphere, I left the waiting room and went to wait on the bench outside. My breath was a white haze in the cold air, and it looked like it was gradually snowing harder. The snow started piling up on my hair and shoulders in colettes, so that if I didn't brush it off every so often, I was in real danger of becoming a snow woman. About half an hour later, a train pulled up to the platform. One middle-aged man was the only person who got off the train and passed through the ticket check. He was red-faced and a little chubby, with a shabby coat and unkempt hair. Basically, he didn't look like he was going to be the mysterious representative. He went into the waiting room, of course. Through the glass door, I could see the three of them talking, but finally the middle-aged man came out by himself, walking over towards me. "A high school girl detective," he said, grinning. "Don't think a girl should be squandering the best years of her life working a thankless job like that, though." He sat down next to me, bringing the smell of alcohol along with him. Is he drunk in the middle of the day? No way, right? I immediately shifted on the bench and put space between us. Oh, don't act so dubious. Are you a detective too? Oh, what the hell else did you think I was? He asked, spreading out both arms. I couldn't speak for anyone else, but to me, he just looked like a drunk old man. Well, I guess there's some use in being suspicious. Everyone's got that youthful vitality inside. But how good of a detective are you really going to be if your powers of observation fall short? Powers of observation? Let me demonstrate. He looked me up and down, gaze looking over my body. Last year, for Christmas, you went to sit through Mass all by yourself, didn't you? But you got sick of those boring hymns, so halfway you skipped out, bought a whole bunch of cakes, went back to your dorm room, and tried a little bit of each of them. It was a lonely Christmas from start to finish. What? How did you know that? I unthinkingly slipped into an offended tone of voice. But shockingly, most of what he said was right on the nose. The only part he got wrong was that I didn't have much money at the time, so instead of buying lots of different cakes, I only had one chocolate cake. Were you watching me from somewhere? Oh, no. These are my powers of observation, he said, looking very pleased with himself. First of all, looking at your uniform, I can tell you're a student of that famous missionary school. It's not too unreasonable to think Christmas Mass would be an event hosted by the school, but I hear school rules have gotten pretty lax over the years, so it's probably not mandatory. Just an optional event, right? How do you know I went myself? Oh, well, those shorts you're wearing are pretty unique, huh? You're probably wearing them for your detective work. Not to mention it's a weekday, but here you are prioritising a request over going to school. If you're that gung-ho about your detective work, you probably don't have many friends to play around with during the rest of your time. Oh, and forget about having a boyfriend. On a special day like Christmas in particular, most everyone's gotta be with the people they're closest to. You're not the kind of person that has any relationships that deep. Mind your own business. He's right though. Hymns are just no fun as a general rule. I thought maybe you wouldn't be able to put up with them. You got the hell out of there halfway through so you could go buy some cake. I know you like sweets since you've got some candy and chocolate peeking out of your backpack there. He pointed to my back. Surprised, I pulled off my backpack to check and saw that the zipper wasn't closed all the way, and the sweets that I had brought were in fact peeking out. I hid them quickly, suddenly self-conscious. And it's obvious you live in the dorm. If you lived at home, your mother wouldn't let you out of the house with that wrinkled collar and frayed hem. The more he pointed things out, the more self-conscious I became, and the more uncanny it felt. If he could see right through all of my actions just from these tiny details, it felt like I couldn't hide anything from him. Is this what it meant to be a detective? It was our first meeting, and I was already overwhelmed by the ability of this person in the same business as me. I felt like as a detective, I wasn't even a match for a drunk old man like this. Huh. Well, I guess you have a little more respect for me now, don't you? He took out a small bottle of whiskey out of his pocket, unscrewing the cap. Oh, while I'm at it, aren't you cold waiting out here? How about I accompany you back inside? I'm fine. I'll stay out here. I turned him down firmly. He looked like he was about to accidentally spit out the whiskey he just took a sip of. Oh, I see. Well, true. It's almost time, so it should be fine waiting out here. I'm heading in. I'm getting up there in age. The middle-aged man staggered back into the waiting room, rolling his heavy-looking carry-on bag. At last. It was almost 3 o'clock, when we were supposed to meet. I saw a white minivan heading our way, driving up between the rice paddies. It was approaching quickly, cutting up the grey, snowy landscape. It stopped suddenly in front of the station, and out of the driver's seat came a man in a dark blue suit. He noticed me immediately and headed my way. Would you happen to be waiting for Mr. Oe? He asked. Yes. And you are? I'm with the taxi company. Mr. Oe has requested that I bring all of you to a certain location. So we still don't get to meet the representative? I started to get a bit worried thinking about this. Where was this going? The weather kept getting worse and everyone else I was travelling with was an older man. Please do get in the car. I got in the minivan like the driver told me to. I got in the very back and put my backpack on the seat next to me so no one else would sit there. The men in the station's waiting room noticed the van too and started to come out and file in. The man in the suit got in first, and then the man in the sunglasses. The drunk old man got in last. He didn't seem to care where he sat, and sat right next to the driver's seat, sitting his carry-on bag in the seat next to him. The driver returned and got back behind the wheel. My apologies, but please wait for a moment before we depart. It isn't too cold inside the car, is it? Would you like something hot to drink? He started distributing cans of coffee that he'd been carrying in his arms. I was chilled down to my bones, so I took a can gratefully, holding it in my hands. What do you mean, please wait for a moment? Asked the man in the suit. Let's hurry up and get going. It is not 3 o'clock yet. Well, there's no one else at the station. There's a train arriving at 2:58, muttered the man in the sunglasses. Who else is going to show up? If they're coming, they are late. Now, don't be so impatient. Here, you want some of this? The drunk old man held out a bottle. I don't drink. The man in the suit rushed off the bottle, opened a can of coffee and started to drink that instead. Then he took a cigarette out of his breast pocket and started to light it up. My apologies, but smoking is not permitted inside the car, said the driver. Say what? The man in the suit raised his voice in irritation, reluctantly putting away the cigarette. I just observed the adults fussing from the back of the car, drinking my coffee and warming myself up. Right about then, a train pulled up to the platform, but here from outside the building, I couldn't see anyone getting off it. The little 2-car train was almost entirely blocked from view by the building. But I saw it again before long, pulling away and heading off into the snow. Did anyone actually get off? Just as it was turning 3 o'clock, I saw a girl at the ticket barrier. She was quite small and frail looking. Who is she? She looked transparent to me. Maybe because her cold, pale skin looked like it was blending into the snowy landscape. A ghost? No, that would be ridiculous. Her evenly cut bangs fluttered in front of her eyes in the wind. That faint swaying was an undeniable proof that she actually existed there in the physical world. Maybe it was appropriate for someone like her to be standing in the corner of this lifeless, dreary world. But as far as the detective appearing before us went, well, she looked completely out of place. She saw the van and, cautious of the snow beneath her feet, ran up to it with a soft crunch, holding her black bag in both hands. Is she the fifth detective? Do you expect me to believe that? After all, the clothes she was wearing, a frilly blouse and a black blazer, those were none other than the uniform of the junior high section of my school. The colour of ribbon on her chest showed that she was a first year in middle school. She stood to the side of the van, making herself taller to peer inside. It didn't seem like she could see us very well from out there. The driver stepped out from the van. "Would you happen to be waiting for Mr. Oe?" he asked, and she bobbed her head in a nod. "Please come in, we have been waiting your arrival." At his invitation, she stepped into the van. She didn't look particularly surprised to see that several people were already inside. Actually, it was the other men who were left speechless by the appearance of such a young detective. I picked up my backpack, opening up a seat for her. She wordlessly sat down, placing her bag on her lap, holding it there with her arms. "Now then, it is time for us to depart." The driver started the engine. The van, with 5 detectives inside, finally started up a road. It would not come back down. The van went up a snowy mountain road with no buildings in sight, let alone any people. "Hey you, can we talk for a sec?" I asked in a low voice to the girl sitting next to me. "Do you know why we're in this car?" She just barely tilted her head as she turned towards me. "Are you a detective?" She nodded. "Really? I sure haven't heard anything about middle school detectives going to my school." "I only just recently transferred to my current school," she said, opening her mouth for the first time. She looked up at me with wide eyes that stared right through me. Though her skin was pale, the cold had made her cheeks slightly red, as if she were wearing blush. It was cute. "Oh, okay. A transfer student. But wait, a middle school detective from the same school as me, getting the same request as me? That's a weird coincidence." "A strange coincidence indeed," the drunk old man said, turning around to face us as soon as the car started driving. "Hey, Uncle Bad Touch, quit making passes on little girls when you're drunk. And don't give me any jokes about cops owing favours to detectives. You don't even deserve to be a detective," the man in the suit interrupted forcefully. Honestly, drunkenly creeping on kids? I can't believe we're in a white van right now. Is this some sort of knockoff candid camera show?" "Oh, look who's talking, greenhorn." The drunk old man's expression suddenly became serious. "I've been a full-time detective for 25 years. I'm not just some loudmouth drunkard." "Well, maybe you should look at this. This might sober you up." The man in the suit pulled out some kind of photo ID card from an inner jacket pocket and showed it off with a smirk. "Ego Amino. DSC number 367. My name is Ego Amino. My detective shelf collection number is 367. So what's yours, old man? Don't tell me you're not even registered." The drunk old man snorted, before starting to rummage around for something, sticking his hand into different pockets. Finally, he found the card he was looking for and showed it to Amino. Ko Inuzuka, DSC number 943. Number 943? You? No, you couldn't be. Number 9, class 3? Really? "This ain't no fake ID," the man called Inuzuka said, taking a swig from his bottle. I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were so high class. Please find it in your heart to forgive my many transgressions." Amino suddenly bowed his head. It kind of felt like I was getting a glimpse of the sordid adult world here. Still, I never would have guessed that that drunk old man would be class 3 either. They say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. "What's class 3? The girl next to me asked. "You don't know?" "No. she said, narrowing her eyes. Is it that remarkable? Oh, as far as detectives go, I took out my own detective library membership card from my wallet to show her. Yui Samideri, DSC number 888. You don't have a card like this? I only recently registered. She took out a notebook out of her bag and slipped a card out from between the pages. Kyoko Kirigiri, DSC number 919. Whoa! You're number 9 too? Number 9 in middle school? You've really got your work cut out for you there, I said in surprise. All of the detectives registered with the detective library have a numbered card. The detective library. It's lined with shelves categorizing informational files on roughly 65,500 detectives. Information on the registered detectives is made available to the public, so anyone can come browse the files freely. If you're in trouble, you should definitely head on down to the detective library. You'll find out which detectives can help you with your problem, and view records of their past cases. For detectives, the primary benefit of registering with the detective library is getting more requests sent your way. It's like a specialised dispatch registry, though it's not their job to play the middleman or make any introductions, since the idea is that the detective library is a database without a bias. Detectives may lose their anonymity due to their data being freely accessible, but no information on a case is published until it's resolved, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. They only publish the most relevant information for past records and personal info too. The detective library made its own classification system for their data in order to sort the files onto the different shelves. They call it the Detective Shelf Collection, but what it really means is that all the detectives get classification numbers. DSC classifications are 3-digit numbers. The first number is the most general sorting, designating a detective's field of specialization. Using Amino's 367 as an example, this would be the 3. It refers to white-collar crime. His specialty is cases that involve embezzlement, breach of trust, and so on. Numbers 9, like Inuzuka and Kirigiri, specialise in murder cases, so you could say that they're the superstars of the detective world. But there is also a lot of them who fail without ever fulfilling their requests. I hear a lot of them die while working their requests too. Next, the number in the middle is the second level of sorting. It indicates even more specific specialties under the umbrella category of the first number. In Amino's case, I guess the 6 means he specialises in corporate espionage. Just looking at him, I wouldn't be surprised if he worked as a corporate spy himself. And then, the last number indicates the detective's rank. Everyone starts at rank 9. You just registered, so that's why you're a 9 too. The number starts going up a little by little, as a detective gets more recognition for their work. You can't just make it to rank 3 overnight, so that old man must be an amazing detective, even if you couldn't just tell by looking at him. The highest rank is 0, by the way. The 0 is proof that you'd mastered your craft. Detectives with the 0 in their classification have earned the respect of their peers. They're called things like zeros or zero class. If rank 0 detectives keep working their way up, they can get a 0 for their middle class number too, which indicates proficiency in all specializations. They're called double 0 class detectives, and their number tells you right from the get-go that they're at the very top of their field. It's the so-called Great Detectives class. If they go even further, they can get a 0 for their first number. That shows proficiency in all of those categories, and join the ranks of the legendary 000 classes. I've heard that in the 15 or so years of a detective library history, only 4 detectives have ever earned the number 000. So would you say that becoming 0 class is the same as receiving recognition as a detective? Kyoko Kirigiri asked. Her eyes were full of innocence, like a child who'd found a map to some buried treasure. Well, I guess, but I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be easy. Actually, I was around your age when I first became a detective, but this is as far as I've gotten in 3 whole years. Let me see that. Amino forcefully snatched my card out of his hands. What? You're a rank 8 in high school? Well, I'm still out of your league. Too bad, detective schoolgirl. He seemed kinda jittery. "What about you, shady-looking boy? You got a card, right?" Inazuka asked the man in the sunglasses. He silently took it out of his pocket to show us. Shita NB, DSC number 245. What? Rank 5? You're higher rank than I am. Emino was trembling. It's true that rank numbers are a good general indicator of a detective's ability, but I'm not sure it's worth waving it around the way he did. "So we all have cards?" NB asked idly. "Oh, nothing strange about someone going to the detective library if find the detectives there to send their request to," slurred Inazuka. "But if I were one making a request, I'd head straight to the Zero class section." "That's certainly true, but perhaps they thought they'd try inviting detectives from all different kinds of classes to see how it went," said Amino. He was evidently acting completely differential to Inazuka now. Maybe he was just really adaptable from going up against corporate spies all the time. I guess that's true. Everyone's got different specialties too. Our esteemed hosts appear to be rather eccentric." "Huh? You know who made the request?" "Well, yeah, when you get to my level, you can figure out who's making a request right away, even if they're anonymous." "Who exactly are they?" "Ryuichiro Kiba. He's a big name in the underworld. Right now we're headed to a private observatory that he personally oversaw the construction on. Ain't that right, driver?" Inazuka called over to the driver's seat. The driver, however, remained silent. Maybe his hands were tied by an order not to answer any questions. "It said Sirius Observatory in the letter," said Amino. "I wonder what sort of place it is exactly. Perhaps you would be knowledgeable on that subject, Mr. Inazuka?" "Oh, you didn't even look into that before showing up, Greenhorn? Oh, I guess I'll have to be the one to explain." Inazuka didn't sound half as put out as he was pretending to be. Apparently, he was completely on board with Amino. "If you look at it from above, Sirius Observatory looks like a 5-pointed star. Apparently the telescope dome is the part that makes the pentagon in the middle of it." As much as Inazuka was talking like he was an expert, I'd already learned all of this in my own investigation. If even I had been able to easily access an astronomy periodical article on the subject, then maybe all the other detectives were also just pretending that they didn't already know this. "The name Sirius itself refers to an extremely bright star, the brightest star in Canis Major, and one of the vertices the Winter Triangle. But actually, this star..." "Is actually what?" humoured Amino. "Well, it looks like one star, but it's actually two. It's what they call a binary star." "Say what?" "The especially bright one is called Sirius A, and the smaller one is called Sirius B. Sirius B is blocked out by Sirius A's light, so it wasn't discovered until telescope technology progressed far enough." "If Sirius Observatory was named that way, then could it be that there was also constructed with two buildings?" "Sharp of you to notice, Amino." "That's right, just like the stars, Sirius Observatory has two star-shaped buildings, with one of them bigger than the other. Sirius A, the bigger one, is the main building, and Sirius B, the smaller one, is a separate building that serves as the entryway. If there's one thing you can tell for certain from how strange the owner made the buildings, is that he's a total loon." "Amazing. That's what I'd expect from a Class 3 detective. Who could have thought that you could do such an exhaustive research prior to your arrival?" I know. Inazuka smiled in satisfaction. His self-congratulatory explanation continued on from there. Most of the information had already been written in the periodical, so I ignored it, gazing out the window at the pure white scenery. It had been probably over an hour since we'd started driving. It was snowing pretty hard outside, and the forest was covered in white. As we drove down the narrow mountain road, the snowy branches formed an arch overhead. Abruptly, the van stopped right in the middle of nowhere. "Hey driver, what's the deal?" "We arrived at our destination," said the driver, turning to face us. I peered out the window. The road was completely surrounded by trees, but there wasn't a single building in sight. "What do you mean? Quit joking around!" Amino shouted. "Are you saying we need to walk from here?" asked NB in a low voice. "Yes, Mr. Oe has provided instructions along those lines. If I am to drop you all off here, there will be arrangements made for your return." "You'll be inconveniencing Instructor Inazuka as well!" Amino had lost his own volume control. Ha, I get it. I'll pay you, so just bring us all the way up to the Sirius Observatory. Just go on and reset the meter. I regret to inform you that I am unable to fulfill such a request. Oh, you're not going to let me pay for your taxi service? Oh, really? What kind of taxi driver are you? Instructor Inuzuka, what do you think we should do with this fellow here? I think we should teach him what happens when you insult a detective. Now just calm down, Greenhorn. It looks like our client doesn't even want anyone other than the detectives going up. As detective, it's part of our job to intuit how our client feels when they pull something like this. Inuzuka smiled, self-satisfied, grabbing his bag and opening the door. And so he left the first footprints in the pristine white snow. You just had a close call just now. Amino spat at the driver, as he also got out of the van. Enby followed, wordlessly stepping out of the vehicle. He adjusted his sunglasses on his face, hoisting his small overnight bag onto his shoulder. Come on, we'd better get out too, I prompted Kirigiri. She stood up, bag in hand, but paused on the step out to peer over at the driver and ask, How did Yoshizono Oi give you your directions? Can you clarify what you mean by how? Asked the driver in return. Did you meet them in person? She asked. No, I simply received my directions over the phone. I have not met them in person. I also had this minivan provided and pointed out for me, he replied. What was their voice like? She asked. What was their voice like? I judged it to be a standard male voice, but I could not tell you anything further than that, the driver said. I see, said Kirigiri, clipped before she got out of the van as if nothing had happened. What was that all about? Did she want to know who the proxy was? Either way, it seemed as if the driver was only taking a job and following orders. I was the last one to get out of the van. And then, with all 5 detectives out, it heartlessly drove back down the snowy road, leaving only tyre tracks that quickly disappeared under the falling snow. We were left completely deserted out into the mountains.